Hey, I'm Koester-Wanner, and you are listening to Casual Cattle Conversations. If you are ready to explore different management practices and focus on improving your operation and the beef industry, this is the podcast for you. Welcome to the show. I'm so excited you are listening. Alrighty, folks, this is a quick, fun interview with Damon Carson. And Damon is the owner of Repurposed Materials. And what he does is he helps repurpose materials. So this is just a fun interview to show how innovative, resourceful, and frugal for America's farmers and ranchers can be when it comes to finding unique ways to use old materials. And so pretty simple and straightforward, but like I said, there's a lot of creativity and ideas that come in this episode. Before we dive into that content, if you are wondering if podcasting is right for you, I would love to share some podcast resources for you. One of the biggest questions I get from people before they start podcasting or before they start working with me is, Shay, I don't know if I have time for a podcast. And I feel ya. But let me tell you, I have a guide that I will happily send to you for free, and it helps break down how long some of these tests take in the beginning up until you get a little more experienced. So you have a little bit of a rough idea of how much time you might need to put into your podcast in the future if you decide to go that route. So if you're interested in learning, if you have enough time to take on a podcast and start your own, head to my website, use the contact us feature, or go to the podcast coaching page and you can connect with me there. And if you just send me a note, it'll go straight to my inbox and I will get back to you. But with that, let's learn how we can be even more creative and innovative by repurposing materials with Damon. Alrighty, Damon, it is fun and exciting to have you on the show because this is a unique conversation and a unique business comparatively to the other types of business owners and individuals that I have on the show. So, how about we start off with you sharing with the audience a little bit about what you do today and how that relates to ranchers?
Sure. Well, appreciate the opportunity, Shay. So, Repurposed Materials, our company, we take the byproducts, the waste, the cast-offs and discards of industry, unwanted by primary industry for whatever reason, and then we look to rehome that. And oftentimes it ends up on farms and ranches across America, solving all kinds of common and not so common problems.
So you are located where right now as we're recording?
So the company's based here in Colorado. I sit in Denver. I'm looking out to my left. I'm looking out the Rocky Mountains. We do have 6 warehouses across the United States, kind of spread out: Arizona, Colorado, Texas, Iowa, Ohio, and South Carolina.
So what's your role with the company? Were you a part of the founding of this? How did you get to this position?
Yep. So I am the owner. I am the founder. Started in 2010. So kind of the origin story, or as I like to say, the Reese's moment when the chocolate meets the peanut butter. So I was born in central Kansas, born and raised in a small town, very much in and around farming and ranching. Became very familiar with people using old oil field pipe to make corrals out of them, and stuff. So just a very resourceful upbringing in central Kansas. So that's one. And then the second was in my 20s, I owned a traditional garbage company, haul it off from the job site, construction trash, and bury it in a landfill. And so in 2010, those two worlds kind of collided again, the chocolate and the peanut butter, when a guy that I had a different company, unrelated, that I was contracting a subcontract airbrush painter to do some high-end design work. And he said, "Hey, Damon, if you ever get a chance to buy an old advertising billboard vinyl, like you see on the sides of the highways, advertising Budweiser, Chevrolet, Coca-Cola, that's just a waterproof vinyl with a picture printed on it. In a second life, They make a great drop cloth for painting, is what he told me. And that was kind of the vision. Little did I know that they make great hay tarps in the ag community as a repurpose example for the farm and ranch. So that's kind of the genesis, the beginnings of the company. And like I said, in 2010.
Well, that's pretty neat that, you were able to take your past experiences and combine them, like you just said, and really connect those dots for those in agriculture. And I found it neat that there's a business around this because, I mean, that's just something like I'm used to. Like you said, the old oil field pipe. Like I grew up, that's what almost all of our corrals are made out of. Um, and not because there's a lot of oil in our area, but because we have family that works in areas that there are. So we have connections to receive some of that. Or like you and I were talking earlier, um, old school buses. You can kind of cut the bottoms off. You can put pipes on the front so calves can get in for calf shelters. And
Sure.
so ranchers do a lot of neat things. What are some, you already talked about old billboards being turned into tarps for hay or feed to prevent spoilage there. What are some other unique and cool repurposing projects that you help ranchers with?
Sure. So I think it's best to kind of profile some of the materials that often get repurposed back into farm and ranch, livestock production, etc. So certainly along with corrals, guardrail from the DOTs from the highways when they're widening a highway. A lot of people listening, that's not a unfamiliar one, but certainly guardrail, it gets a different second life as corral panels, etc. The one that everybody that's non-farm and ranch loves. I mean, they just cackle with laughter, but if you don't own big animals, you're unaware of it. But, a big market for used street sweeper brushes, for backscratchers, for horses, dairy cows, bison, etc. So lots of very active market for those used street sweeper brushes. One of them that we love, I call it the Swiss Army knife on the farm and ranch, is used conveyor belting from the mining industry. Big rolls of rubber, could be any width, 18 inches, 24 inches, 36, sometimes as wide as 72 inches, can be 80 feet, 200 feet. Sometimes we get in rolls, 8 foot tall, 600-700 feet. But on a farm and ranch, all kinds of things. It can be made into feed bunks. Windbreaks for cattle is a popular one for old conveyor belting. A lot of times it'll be an aisle mat in a barn. So, to protect the horse's feet, sometimes it gets repurposed even as stall mats or in the horse trailers. So I always say when, a farmer or rancher calls with, inquiring about conveyor belt, and I say, well, and he asks, will it work for my problem or will it solve my problem? I said, well, guess what? You may not find it to be a great solution for problem A, but it can probably solve problem B, problem C, or problem D on your ranch. So, gosh, I could keep going. Do you want me to keep going? I've got others, but you're the hostess, so want to.
Is there like one project that or like creative use that kind of like tops the charts for you as wow, that was thinking outside of the box?
Well, I think one of them that's really kind of simplistic, but it really makes a lot of sense is swimming pool covers. So these are the kinds that at HOAs, homeowners associations, at the Ritz-Carltons, at the recreations, park and recs districts, big, you think about an Olympic-sized swimming pool, and a lot of times they're mesh. So water goes right through them, and they don't want them, especially at a high-end hotel, they don't want them to get frayed and faded, and so they'll retire them. But man, in a second life, they work perfect as a big shade screen. You put it between two big telephone poles, utility poles, or hook two sides to the side of your barn, and you have an extended life for that retired swimming pool cover as a shade screen, shade tarp.
Would you say that ranchers come to you with the problem and are looking for ideas for what materials to use? Or do they already have an idea of what materials they're looking for, how they want to solve the problem? What does that kind of relationship look like?
Yeah, the chicken or the egg question. I would say it works both ways. Lots of times the ag community will come to us. Here's the problem we're trying to solve. What do you have? One of the things we always talk about with used materials is attributes, characteristics, and engineering. They want something that's, UV protective. They want something that's flexible. They want something that's rigid, and we help them shop through what we have that might fit that. But in the case of the street sweeper brushes, a great example, opposite. In the early days, I had a lady call and say, do you have any old street sweeper brushes? And I have to admit embarrassment at this point, but I said, we don't, but what in the world would you use an old street sweeper brush for? And she says, oh, they make great cattle scratchers. And so there's examples both ways of the chicken or the egg, where sometimes we just have the materials and the ag community figures out what to do with it. Sometimes they come to us and saying, hey, we want this. Can you source this? Can you procure this for us with your relationships in industry and with the corporate America?
So, you're sourcing and procuring that, and then you ship that to the rancher and they put it together to fit their needs for whatever problem. Or like with the conveyor belting, or if people were, say, taking like tires to make chute mats or mats for barns or whatnot, do you guys put those together? Like, are you just basically, the question is, are you just sending the raw material, or are you doing any assembly of your own?
Yep. So the answer is we just send the raw material. So in the case of conveyor belting, it's 36 wide, maybe 100 feet long. It's just a roll. We send it out to you. If holes need to be drilled in it, to maybe we have some farmers who will use it as a deflector. So in no-till applications, when you have really abrasive corn stalks, sunflower stalks that tend to be really hard on the equipment, they'll hang that used conveyor belt as a deflector on the leading edge, so it takes the abuse instead of getting up into the mechanisms and stuff and slowing down the planting process. So in that case, holes need to be drilled or whatever. That's because everybody's going to modify it differently depending on their application.
So, just trying to think here. There's a lot we could talk about. Now, I know farming and ranching is only one segment of people you serve. Are they the majority of your business, or are they kind of on the smaller end? Because repurposing stretches across all industries.
Very definitely. So we service all kinds of industries, architects and interior designers. A lot of boat and marine, so tugboat operators, barge operators on the Ohio and the Mississippi River. So these cast-offs and discards can be rehomed, get a second life in lots of different ways. But farm and ranch is huge for us. So kind of our big segments are farm and ranch, livestock production, land management, and by land management, certainly ranch, farm fits that, but land management could be a timber company, it could be a cemetery, it could be an airport, just organizations that control a lot of land. And then the final one is the big one. The big three would be construction, any type of remodel or construction. Could be big, huge skyscrapers. It could be just a remodel in somebody's backyard. But so those are kind of the three big. So ag it's an important market for us for sure.
Do you find that ranchers are looking to repurpose because there's a cost effectiveness that might come instead of, buying other things new? Or is it because, it feels good to give something a second life and know that it's just not going to the pit or the landfill? Like, why do you hear and see people wanting to repurpose these materials?
So I think that's a very complicated question, and it's a little bit divisive, and I'll get to that. But I would say my impression is for most in the ag community, they're trying to be frugal. They're trying to be, stretch their budgets. So whether you buy a used tractor, a used pickup truck, a used shirt, you typically save 50 to 75% when you buy used. So I think that's the primary reason. Now, there's some in the ag community that are certainly the green, the sustainable, the keep it out of the landfill is a part of it. But I think that's the minority. But for big business, where we get the stuff, corporate America, it's kind of opposite. It's sustainable. We have landfill diversion goals. It's the circular economy. We can't throw this away. Our shareholders, our customers don't want that anymore. So it is kind of interesting. And one of the things I often say, and this is kind of the divisive part, especially in an election year, is, I mean, this really makes sense for both sides of the political aisle. You know, the Democratic sides tends to be the green, they keep it out of the landfill, but and I tell them all the time, but you know who's keeping it out of the landfill? It's more the right leaning, the conservative Republicans who are the farmers and the ranchers. They're the ones that are really absorbing this stuff. So, you know, I think it really is, we all work together, and you know, we don't have to hate the other side or dislike the other side. It just kind of works together. So anyway, it is just kind of an interesting dichotomy of how this whole repurposing, the before and the after, kind of intermingle in societies that and people groups that sometimes don't see eye to eye.
That is an interesting perspective on how you are working with some very different industries and tying it together. I appreciate you talking about that. And yes, it does depend on the individuals. Everyone is different. Every business
Absolutely.
is different. And we need all kinds of kinds.
Yeah, absolutely. We as America create the waste. We as America need to try to reabsorb as much as we can.
Yes. So I would actually like a few more examples of some stuff that you're working on. You know, we talked about conveyor, guardrail, the advertising tarps or screens. You know, I shared my own personal examples with oil stem and school buses, you know, and street sweepers. I mean, give us a few more examples. I'm sure you have like a list that goes on and on and on, but
well, maybe not on and on, but it is lengthy. I think one that's little known, but when they're changing out playgrounds in big cities, school districts, a lot of times it's rubber pads that, you know, life number one, when the kid falls off the monkey bars or the slipper slide, you know, try to keep them from breaking bones or cracking their skulls. Well, those used playground tiles, lots of things can be done with them, but people with horses love those as stall mats because life number one, they're meant to be cushiony to protect, you know, kids from hurting themselves on the playground. It's really helps the legs and you know, for the horses that stand on that all day long in the stalls and the paddocks. That would be one. Another interesting one is the big military cargo parachutes. These are the ones that drop the Jeeps and the pallets of food and rations and ammunition out of the big jet planes during war times, military type stuff. But they're huge, 30-foot, 60-foot, 100-foot diameter. So that's an alternate to the shade screens. A lot of those get purchased by livestock owners to rig up as shade screens. Another one that comes to mind is turf from the football fields. So this is soccer fields. Most turf today lasts about 7-8 years, and then they replace the fields. 1.5-inch plastic shag carpeting. Two ideas in ag that come to mind is one is poultry. They'll use it as a nest pad. So you can buy a new nest pad, 1.5-inch plastic shag carpeting, brand new. But what is used football turf these days? It's just 1.5-inch plastic shag carpeting that they lay under the cages of the laying hen. So it's a little cushiony. So when the egg drops, the egg doesn't crack. Another one that's popular with used turf is show cattle or any kind of a show animal where they want to keep them out of the dirt and the muck right before the 4-H season right now. It's county fair time. So that's another popular one for that. Insulation, lots of used rigid insulation coming off of school districts, warehouses in the big cities. 4x8 sheets can be, you know, 2 inches, 3 inches, 4 inches. That often gets repurposed for low cost building insulation in barns and outbuildings, stuff like that. Lots of precast concrete, you know, 2, 3, 4 inches, depending on the application, flat pieces. That often gets purchased by livestock owners to be aprons around water tanks, around feed bunks to, you know, keep the muck and the mire down. And So, those are more that come to mind. I'm sure if you wanted to keep going, we could, but those
Well,
are
I'm
more.
curious, geographically, since you're spread out, are there different regions of the country that request certain types of materials for projects compared to other ones? Like, what are the differences you see regionally for that?
So I would actually answer it opposite. I would say the demand, which is your question, is pretty equal. I mean, a cow in Florida and a cow in Oregon kind of have the same needs, if you will.
Mhm.
What we do see though is the sourcing of materials can sometimes be regional. So if you're in Texas, Oklahoma, Kansas, Western PA, where there's a lot of oil field work, North Dakota, the Bakken, you're very familiar with oil field pipe. If you're in Oregon or New Hampshire, where there's not a lot of oil field production, it's less common, or it's maybe to the point of unheard of. What's oil field pipe? I don't even know about that, and it's just off the radar screen. So a lot of times it's the procurement stuff that's more regional in nature than the actual demand, because again, a horse is a horse no matter where it's at.
Right.
A buffalo is a buffalo if you're trying to solve a problem. So that's how I'd answer that question.
Alrighty. Well, before we wrap up today, do you have any final thoughts or anything you would like to share with those listeners out there about repurposing?
Well, a funny anecdotal story. So I speak a lot around the country at conferences, and I was speaking to a bunch of engineers several years back. And we came to the Q&A time, and an engineer in his mid-50s raises his hand and said, "Hey, Damon, did you invent repurposing?" And I just tried not to laugh. And I just thought it was such an insult and such an ignorant question. I mean, one, did you have parents, grandparents that lived through the Great Depression? Um, but obviously it was a city slicker. I mean, he just had no idea. And I think the ag community, agriculture is the one industry, and I've done this for almost 15 years now, is the one industry that you don't have to introduce or teach repurposing to. I mean, you guys have just done it generation
Mhm.
after generation. Shay, you started with some examples just from your own upbringing. So I just think it's kind of funny, but most other industries, they're like, "Oh my gosh, this is so cool. Wow, why didn't somebody else think of that? I'm so glad you thought of that." And a rancher in North Dakota, a farmer in Iowa, they're just kind of not, maybe not even snickering. They're just belly laughing about, how foolish is that big city engineer to ask such an ignorant question or an uninformed question.
Well, we definitely are frugal people and
Frugal and resourceful,
frugal and
and innovative,
resourceful
and not.
and innovative. And yeah, it's we uh we are some leaders in that area
I would
and
100%
a
agree.
lot of other areas. So where can people go to find more information about your company if they
Sure.
want to?
Yep. You can just Google repurposed materials. If you're a Facebooker, we have a very active Facebook page. Repurposed materials will get you there. LinkedIn, if you happen to do that. We have a widely followed newsletter where we broadcast. It's certainly showing new products, but it's just showing lots of ideas. A lot of people that never even buy from us just like the inspiration, the education on how people in different industries are solving problems. So if you go to our website, there's a little pop-up. You can sign up for our e-newsletter that goes out several times a week. But love to have you join us. And um, obviously, we love customers, but we love ideas and just the thought leadership that the ag community gives us on how to rehome, reuse, repurpose all these cast-offs and discards.
Well, awesome. Thank you very much for being on the show today and sharing your experiences and stories and shedding good light on agriculture for being resourceful.
Thanks, Shay.
And that's a wrap on that one, folks. Thanks for tuning in. Remember, the best way to support this podcast or other podcasts is to share with a friend, give a rating or review. And if you really want to connect with me, I would love to get a DM from you or a message on my website, hearing what questions, thoughts, ideas, follow ups, anything. I really enjoy knowing who is listening and learning about your operations. So, with that, happy ranching and have a great day.